We're continuing on with Govardhan Puja in terms of what has happened now that Krishna has lifted Govardhan Hill and he's put it back into place after 7 days. Saturday morning, we spoke about the reaction throughout Vrindavan as the villagers went back and expressed their appreciation to Krishna, each according to their particular relationship with Krishna, their stature. We spoke Saturday morning about how the elders would embrace Krishna, smell his head, and massage his left arm, which had held up Govardhan Hill, cracking the knuckles on his hands, on his left hand, thinking to give relief. We spoke about how the cowherd boys, his friends, would joke with Krishna. The juniors would fall at his feet and clutch his feet. And of course, the young cowherd girls of Vrindavan could fully express their affection for Krishna because the whole village was rejoicing. So the young cowherd girls didn't have to be shy. They didn't have to hide anything, because everyone was glorifying Krishna. Today we'll discuss what happened when you could say the spell broke. You see, while Krishna was holding up Govardhan Hill, the whole of Vrindavan, the people, the animals, they were all staring at Krishna, relishing the sweetness of his beauty, staring at his face. Once Govardhan Hill was back in its place, and once the victory celebration had subsided, you might say that reality hit the older cowherd men. Who is this boy, really? They couldn't think like that when Krishna was lifting Govardhan Hill, when they were all under the hill with Krishna as he held it, because they were overwhelmed by the sweetness. But now, once this Leela was over, the older cowherd men started to think, what is going on here? Who is this boy? Twice they expressed themselves to Nanda Maharaj after first discussing amongst themselves. The theme of our talk tonight is this paradox as presented by the older cowherd men, the older gopas. On the one hand, this boy is only 7 years old. And on the other hand, we see that he has lifted the great hill, Govardhan. This paradox was a source of great perplexity for them. They began to discuss amongst themselves, first of all. And then they decided to go see Nanda Maharaj, Vrajaraj, the chief, the king of Vrindavan. And they presented the facts to Nanda Maharaj. First of all, your boy, when he was just an infant, he sucked out not only the breast milk filled with poison of Pujana, but he sucked her life out at the same time. That is inconceivable. Then there was Shakatasura, the cart demon. Baby Krishna, just by kicking up his feet, knocked the whole cart down. And they recited a whole list of demons that Krishna had killed. On the list were also demons that Balaram had killed. But that's all right, because Balaram gets his power from Krishna. So it wasn't inaccurate for the cowherd men to say demons like Palambasura, Dhenukasura. It was not inaccurate for them to say that Krishna had killed them. They submitted pastimes like Krishna saving the residents of Vrindavan from a forest fire, dancing on the head of Kaliya and subduing Kaliya. They had seen all this. These previous pastimes had not tipped the balance, so to speak, in their mind. They still accepted Krishna as a little boy. Remember, we were discussing, those of you who were here Saturday morning, Indra had a different kind of problem seeing Krishna as a little boy. Twice he stated his conclusion. Krishna Marcham Upashraja. These residents of Vrindavan have taken shelter of an ordinary boy named Krishna. He's just an ordinary boy, and they foolishly have listened to him and stopped my Indra Puja. Indra was raging like that. The cowherd men, however, their attitude was completely different. They were absorbed in pure, natural love for Krishna. They were not theists in the ordinary sense. They were not believing in Krishna as God. And therefore, they were attracted to Krishna. Because first of all, he's God, and therefore we should have attraction for him. We should have reverence for him. No. The cowherd men of Vrindavan are showing that they are beyond theism. They are simply, unlimitedly attracted to Krishna. Not simply because Krishna is God. But then again, because Krishna is unlimitedly attractive, that shows he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As Srila Prabhupada will explain, outside the principle of attractiveness, there's no meaning to God. It is not that the science of God begins and ends with accepting the Supreme as the Ishwar, the controller. Unless we understand how the Supreme, how Bhagavan is all attractive, our understanding of the science of the Supreme is very incomplete. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada explains, there is a great difference between understanding God as the Supreme Controller and understanding God as the Supreme Enjoyer. The Supreme Enjoyer must be unlimitedly attractive. So this is what the cowherd men of Vrindavan are dealing with. Who is this 7-year-old boy? We've already seen him do amazing things, but this lifting of Govardhan Hill, this is the tipping point. He lifted Govardhan Hill as easily as an elephant lifts a lotus flower. They say like that because a lotus flower is very beautiful and Krishna is unlimitedly beautiful. In that way, they spoke about the ease by which Krishna lifted Govardhan Hill. So, in other words, they could handle all the preceding pastimes. The killing of this demon, the killing of that demon, the killing of Trinavrata, the whirlwind demon. They can handle all that. But when they saw Krishna lift Govardhan Hill, and looking back and thinking about what they saw, they were pushed into questioning, who is this 7-year-old boy? Is he God? He must be God. Just look what he did. But then they flipped to the other side. How could he be God, though? We know his activities. He cries if he doesn't get attention. He steals butter. He tells lies. He talks childishly, chattering. Yet, he lifted Govardhan Hill. So on one hand, he must be God. On the other hand, look at the other facts. Look at how he behaves as a child. They accepted that Krishna had very nicely convinced Nanda Maharaj to drop the Indra Puja. That in and of itself was a great feat, a great accomplishment. To get everyone to peacefully and happily accept the conclusion that all the resources gathered for the Indra Puja should be offered to Govardhan. So the cowherd man, Kargi Kanapur explains this. The cowherd men, they could accept that impressive feat of Krishna's convincing them all to worship Govardhan Hill. But the lifting of Govardhan Hill was the tipping point. Too much. So please remember this theme. On the one hand, this boy is only 7 years old. And on the other, we see that he has lifted the great hill Govardhan. So they presented this twice to Nanda Maharaj. Therefore, O king of Vraja, a doubt about your son arises within us. They went to the big house of Nanda Maharaj to consult him. And they presented, as I said, this long list of pastimes, which they could accommodate. But this lifting of Govardhan Hill was causing them to think that this is no ordinary boy. He must be God. But how could God take birth in a lowly cowherd village? So they were just trapped, like a computer that's locked up. They just, on the one hand this, on the other hand that. On the one hand, he did all these pastimes. On the other hand, he lifted Govardhan Hill. On the one hand, he did all these pastimes. On the other hand, he's an infant. He's a child. In their conclusion of their presentation to Nanda Maharaj, they pointed out, most of all, the hardest thing to understand about his identity is that we are unlimitedly attracted to him, and he is unlimitedly attracted to us. They're starting to think about their anurag, their affection for Krishna. He obviously is no ordinary person. Just look at the attractiveness that we feel and the attraction for us that he feels. Well, what kind of extraordinary person is he? He must be the super soul. That's it. Paramatma. But no, how can he be Paramatma? Paramatma sits in our hearts indifferently. Whereas Krishna, he's attracted to all the animals, all the cows, all the people. No, he can't be Paramatma. So now they are totally absorbed in trying to analyze Krishna's affection. How can we love him so much? And how can he love us so much? They say to Nanda Maharaj, Dear Nanda, how is it that we and all the other residents of Braja cannot give up our constant affection for your son? And how is it that he is so spontaneously attracted to us? They're dealing now with the essence of bhakti, this mutual attraction. What's going on? So now Nanda Maharaj, he feels necessary. He feels it's necessary to erase their philosophical speculation. Why? Because Nanda Maharaj, in the same way as Gargarishi, who spoke at Krishna's Namakarana ceremony, his name-giving ceremony, the same fear was there. Gargarishi is thinking, I want to say my words very carefully. I want to say that this boy will be like Narayan, because I'm very careful not to disturb the rasas in Vrindavan. I don't want them thinking he is Narayan, because that might cripple their affection. So therefore I'll say that, yes, this boy has come in previous ages, Shuklo Rakta Ta Pita Idanim Krishna Tangata. He's been white, he's been red, he's been yellow, and now he is blackish blue. It's Krishna. I'll explain all that as I give Krishna his name, but I don't want them to think he is Narayan. So Gargarishi crept up as close as possible to the reality, but he hedged his words. This boy will be like Narayan. He'll have qualities like Narayan. He will rescue you from all distress. He will bring joy to all of you. So Nanda Maharaj is now going to follow suit. Nanda Maharaj is careful with the feelings, the rasa of these older cowherdmen. He explains to them that, remember, Gargarishi said these things? And he basically repeated whatever Gargarishi had said earlier in Krishna Lila. The goal of Nanda Maharaj was to make sure that the cowherd men did not diminish their feelings of affection. He didn't want them falling into awe and reverence. He wanted them to snap out of the Aishvarya tendencies that they were showing. This is how delicate bhakti is. It is the science of pure love. So Nanda Maharaj convinced them that he's like Narayan. At the same time, Nanda Maharaj said, you, as the village elders, should show compassion upon him. You should give him your blessings. That way, he preserved the status of the relationship that the elders had with little Krishna. Yes, you could say he has qualities like Narayan. Yes, you could say that in some way he resembles Narayan. But don't forget, your main role is to give him blessings. Your main role is to show compassion upon him. So that's how Nanda Maharaj skillfully resolved the situation. This shows us that in material life, in spiritual life, how we handle the feelings of others is very important. The feelings and emotions of the material world are perverted reflections of the pure emotions of the spiritual world. As we make more and more advancement in bhakti, we become more and more able to deal with the personalism, the sensitivity of others. Srimad Bhagavatam softens our heart. Material existence seems to touch our hearts. but actually in the process of associating with the modes of material nature, our hearts become hard. As Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, Karnam gunasangasya sarasa yoni jamasya. Associating with the modes of material nature is not an innocent affair. We may think, I'm just living my life. I'm just doing the normal duties. I'm just carrying on with my affairs. What is so unusual about that? Isn't it normal? But Bhagavad Gita is teaching you that pushing on with material affairs, carrying on with your material activities, means incurring reactions. There's nothing innocent about it. The guna sangha. The sangha, the association with Trigunamai, leaves imprints upon you. There's no free experiences in the material world. And the prime manifestation of guna sangha, association with the modes of material nature, is yoni. You have to have a source of birth. Whether it's the womb, whether it's an egg, whether it's a seed, you have to have yoni because there's guna sangha. So as soon as we think about the so-called normal course of material affairs, you have to think about yoni. What source of birth will I have next time? The two go hand in hand, the guna sangha and the yoni. And as we progress through material life, our heart becomes harder and harder. Although we think we're being very loving, we think we're being very caring, from the spiritual viewpoint, our hearts are hardened. To understand how afflicted our heart becomes by engaging in material activities takes some knowledge. It can be very difficult to see because all around us, conditioned souls engage in material activities with great pride. And they think that those material activities are evidence of progress. The Bhakti science teaches you, look into the heart and see the lumps, the hard spots there, which naturally must occur as we make our way through material life, because making your way through material life means how to be the controller, how to be the enjoyer. Those ambitions cause heart pollution, and the heart pollution causes stones and lumps in the heart. Sometimes we wonder, why can I not call out to Krishna? Why can I not chant Hare Krishna as the acharyas instruct, with the attitude of a child calling out to mother? Why can't I do that? It's because of contact with material nature. The result is our hearts have become hard. So the bhakti process purifies the heart so that it can melt. That is our natural condition, a melted heart. When we participate in the processes of devotional service, when we participate, especially in hearing and chanting about Krishna, individually and in kirtan, those activities are for melting the heart. By ridding the heart of contamination, and then the heart softens. When you read Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, you see the perfection of the melted heart. That is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Even though he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, showing how to be a perfect bhakta, still, he claims then he had no love for Krishna. He's showing you the humility that a real devotee has. He said, if while I'm chanting Hare Krishna, you see tears in my eyes, you should know it's just a show. Because if I actually loved Krishna, I would have died long ago from separation. This gives us insight into what is real love. What is the real interior condition. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that the devotee is dear to him and dear to everyone. As we make spiritual advancement, we start to see that our natural condition, our natural situation is indeed to be dear to everyone as part of Krishna. When we're properly situated in our relationship with Krishna, then naturally we're dear to everyone. We can't artificially do that. Therefore, the acharyas instruct, first you love Krishna, and then you can love everyone else. If you're actually loving Krishna, then automatically you're loving everyone else. But if you're loving everyone else and you're not loving Krishna, you're actually not loving everyone else. Because they're all part of Krishna. So it all goes together. Loving Krishna and loving everyone else. Becoming dear to Krishna, becoming dear to all living entities. This Govardhan pastime, we explained yesterday morning, is all about increasing the love of the residents of Vrindavan. More so than it's about humiliating Indra. Although Indra's pride was so extraordinary. But then again, we have to think about our own pride. We cannot demonize Indra, blame Indra for everything. We have to look at our own hearts and how we take pride in material activities. We take pride in our material acquisitions, our material attainments. In this way, our heart becomes hard, and we march on through material existence with an attitude that we are competent rather than we are helpless. The residents of Vrindavan, they know nothing but Krishna. They understand their helplessness. They live only for Krishna. But because we have picked up contamination in our struggles through material life, we develop this confidence in ourselves as separate from Krishna. Sometimes in the world of business, in terms of what is the successful behavior in the business world, often it is said that you should have high confidence. You should have a high estimation of yourself. And that is a necessary factor for success. But even in the mundane business world, it's being recognized now that this is a fallacy. High confidence means you become arrogant. You don't listen to others. Because you're impressed by your own mentality. You're impressed by your own ability. I was just hearing how the founder of Facebook, what is his name? Zucker or something like that. Yeah. he has a Chinese wife. And one of his goals is to learn Chinese, which is a difficult language for English speakers. So it's very nice, actually. He tries to push on his life, making a goal for every year. That's very good. We are very goal-orientated also. We want to become purified and render pleasing service to Krishna. So he has his goals. So one of them was to learn Chinese. And he's considered a person with very high self-esteem. And that's supposedly one ingredient of success. But as we pointed out, it's being noted even in the mundane world that high self-esteem leads to insensitivity, leads to, as they say in Australia, you become full of yourself. So he was saying to his wife, who's native Chinese, he said, you know, I guess I don't communicate as well with you in Chinese. I guess, you know, in that language I have a communication problem. And his wife looked at him and said, I think you've got the same problem in English. So, even in the material business world, some people recognize that low self-esteem will propel you forward more. In that you'll have a healthy respect for others. You won't have an inflated ego about yourself. You can listen more easily. What you should guard against is extreme low self-esteem. But ordinary low self-esteem, maybe it's not so bad. Bhakti gives us the real ego. We don't have to become lost in complexities about how high is my self-esteem, how low is it, in between, what to do, will I be successful, do I have the right attitude for success? Krishna's devotee has a pure ego. I am Krishna's servant. As Krishna told Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, Nimittamacham bhavisarasacham. Arjuna, you can only be an instrument in this battle. Victory or defeat is not your concern. Just be the instrument. Be perfect ego. Cooperate with my plan. This is our desire. We don't want to follow in the footsteps of Indra, who raged so much just because he felt minimized, just because he felt his will was ignored. That rage overtook him so much that he considered Krishna to be an ordinary person. And he's a deva, he's demigod. But he became so overwhelmed with ego. That teaches us a lesson. That in executing our necessary affairs in this world, family affairs, work affairs, school affairs, we should always see ourselves as Krishna's servant. Seeing ourselves as Krishna's servant means, how is Krishna the enjoyer of what I'm doing? When Srila Prabhupada was in Melbourne, he gave a very beautiful analysis of how can you tell whether you're in the material or the spiritual world. He said, as soon as you say and act by accepting Krishna as the enjoyer of your activities, and that means acting according to Krishna's direction. As soon as you act for Krishna's pleasure, according to his direction, you are no longer in the material world. Now you may say, well, we're doing things for Krishna here. I don't feel like I'm in the spiritual world. But gradually, as you progress in bhakti, your vision changes. You can put the most precious gem, a diamond, in a 5-year-old child's hand. The child does not recognize that he or she has a priceless gem in the hand. Nevertheless, the fact is the child has a diamond. But because the child is not aware of the value of the gem, the child can easily toss it away or try to swallow it. Still, the child has a diamond in the hand. Similarly, when we are engaged in serving Krishna according to his direction, and making Krishna the enjoyer of our activities. We are in the spiritual world, but gradually we'll become more conscious of that. Just as gradually as the child becomes older, the child realizes, oh, this is not just a piece of stone, this is a diamond, this is very precious. So the process of bhakti is about reviving our original consciousness so that we become aware that actually it is impossible to be separated from Krishna. Our vision has been covered because we're trying to imitate Krishna as the controller and enjoyer. But if we simply perform our activities under Krishna's direction, for Krishna's pleasure, then we're not in the material world. The spiritual world simply means activities all 100% for Krishna's enjoyment. The material world means activities for pleasing the artificial controllers and artificial enjoyers. And then various mixtures of that. Various mixtures of spiritual and material motivation. So Prabhupada concluded his explanation in Melbourne by saying, this is not Melbourne, this is Vaikuntha. Then he went further, this is Vrindavan. So what are you going to say now? Well, you mean we don't have to go all the way to India, to Vrindavan? Just get on the plane and go to Melbourne? The explanation Prabhupada gave is that because in a temple, and he said this not simply in Melbourne, whenever he traveled the world, often he would say, this is not London, or this is not New York, this is Vaikuntha. Why? Because when there is organized activity simply for the pleasure of Krishna, under Krishna's direction, and when you plug into those organized activities, that means you have plugged into the spiritual world. So as long as we can be a thriving part of that network of spiritual activities meant for Krishna's pleasure, under Krishna's direction, we're no longer in the material world, and gradually we'll realize that. Gradually. You can remember when you were children, there's so many things you didn't understand, but by the careful nurturing of your parents, you accepted that. I'll be all right, and gradually I will understand. Similarly, by the careful nurturing of our Krishna conscious guides, we can feel safe and secure in making spiritual progress. Everyone needs this guidance. Just like the elder Gopas of Vrindavan, they were bewildered. Who is this Krishna? So they sought guidance. They sought out Nanda Maharaj and presented the facts to him. All that Krishna had done. At the same time, Krishna's childish behavior. And then they presented the dynamics of the attraction, the mutual attraction between Krishna and the residents of Vrindavan. Not simply the human residents, but the animals also. They presented all that to Nanda Maharaj. And Nanda Maharaj very sensitively, so as to increase their love, not dampen their love with Aishvarya, with concerns of awe and reverence. He wanted that love to be natural, spontaneous. So he very carefully explained to them. He's like Narayan. But remember, he's the village boy. In fact, Nanda Maharaj didn't say, my son is like this. He said, in so many words, our son. In other words, he's drawing them all into the situation. Our boy, Krishna. It's not only that I am seeing him in this way, but you should also see him in that way. He's our village boy. Who's sort of like Narayan. But don't become too caught up in this awe and reverence. Just let the spontaneous love flow. Now, Nanda Maharaj actually never thought that Krishna is God. He just thought that sometimes people, they talk like this. And he always felt it was his duty to straighten people out when they would think Krishna is God. His pure Vatsalya praying, his love of Krishna and parental love, was never disturbed. Mother Yashoda's love was never disturbed by awe and reverence. And therefore, Nanda Maharaj didn't want these older cowherd men to have their love disturbed by awe and reverence. In other words, Nanda Maharaj is saying, the natural thing is obvious. Bless Krishna. Pray for his protection. Have compassion upon him. You can only have compassion on someone who is in an inferior situation. You are elders. He's a little boy. Have compassion upon him. In other words, stop all this talk about whether he's a god or a demigod or this or that. He's just little Krishna who sometimes seems to show qualities like Narayan. This is how delicate life in Vrindavan is. The spiritual reality is the most delicate, the most sensitive, the most personal. But somehow or other, due to our contact with material nature, guna sangha, we take material existence to be so normal, we take it to be fulfilling, we take it to be a source of opportunity, and this is our great mistake. By hearing about Krishna's pastimes, we lose our ferocious attachment for material nature. Material attachment will always disappoint us. By hearing Krishna's activities, we see true progress in our understanding Krishna rather than in our material affairs. So yes, we execute our necessary material affairs, but our pride, and yes, devotees can have pride, positive pride is, I am Krishna's servant. In Chaitanya Charitamrita you read how Lord Chaitanya's devotees, Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita Acharya, they would suddenly just jump up. I am Lord Chaitanya's servant. I am Lord Chaitanya's servant. I am the servant of his servant. Suddenly they would just jump up and shout that out in ecstasy. That is real ego. That is real self-esteem. That kind of real ego and self-esteem is the product of a heart that's completely soft. In concluding this celebration of Govardhan Puja, we are begging Krishna that the stones in our heart can be softened so that we can cry out to him in some kind of way approaching the quality of the cries of the residents of Vrindavan when they were afflicted by the storms sent by Indra. Krishna, Krishna, Mahabhav. They were helpless in the most powerful way. In other words, there's power in the helplessness of the Brijvasis. They put themselves completely at Krishna's disposal as they called out to him. And that is the most powerful position in all of existence. Whether material existence or spiritual existence, the most powerful position is to be like a helpless child, completely dependent upon Krishna. We have time for maybe one or two questions. Yes? Speak loudly, please. You're asking about sensitivity in dealing with devotees, and therefore what? How can we properly associate with different devotees? I often explain that associating with devotees is not a material skill. It requires spiritual empowerment. Therefore, if we beg the deities to teach us the art, science, and culture of devotee association, gradually you'll see that you acquire the spiritual skills. They're not material social skills. Devotees are special. The association of devotees is the rarest thing in existence. Special skills are required. If you make the mistake of thinking that association with devotees is based on how to win friends and influence people, you made a great mistake. Beg Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, please let me learn how to splash, swim, and dive in the ocean of devotee association. And they will empower you, and gradually you'll notice. First you have to ask for it. But you won't ask if you're thinking, oh, devotees, just an ordinary thing, what's the big deal? But if you understand how rare and special association with devotees is, you'll know. I've got to beg for that divine empowerment, how to properly relate with devotees. Yes?
When you take action in Krishna consciousness, how do you distinguish in your real ego based on the subject compared to the actions in the material world?
He's asking, how do you distinguish actions for Krishna's pleasure from material actions? That's why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Tadvidi pranipatena. If you want to know the truth about how to act in this world, then you need to approach Krishna's representative. You need a guide. Otherwise, it can be very difficult. Some people think Arjuna was acting material. How can he be a devotee? He's a military man. Other people think, how can he be a military man when he's a devotee? They go one side or the other. How to see it all fit together? How to be in the world but not of the world? That requires guidance. And that's what Krishna asked for in Bhagavad Gita. And as we pointed out, even the residents of Vrindavan went for guidance after Krishna lifted Govardhan Hill. They didn't understand what was going on. They went to Nanda Maharaj. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
His Holiness Devamrita Swami ki
Jai.